Now we will continue with a short CESRIC video. We will now proceed to the opening remarks. I would like to invite Mr. Fadi Farasin, Assistant Director General of CESRIC, to read the message of His Excellency Mr. Nabil Dabur, Director General of CESRIC. The floor is yours, Mr. Farasin.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Distinguished participants, dear guests, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I would like to begin with expressing my gratitude and our appreciation to our host, the United Arab Emirates, for their generosity and facilitating the organization of this seminar as part of Dubai Expo 2020. I would also like to express my gratitude to the General Secretariat of the OIC for their kind collaboration in organizing today's seminar. I am also grateful to all the speakers and panelists who have dedicated their valuable time to share their expertise with us today. It is a privilege for CESRIC to host this seminar to discuss the challenges faced by elderly and persons with disabilities in OIC countries. We realize the importance of this issue and consider it a valuable opportunity that CESRIC is able to share its institutional expertise with you and participate in dialogue to inform policymaking that is conducive to the well-being of the elderly and persons with disability. Distinguished participants, dear guests, let me begin with a few words about the activities that we at CESRIC undertake towards improving the well-being and participation of the elderly and persons with disability. Over the 43 years of its existence, CESRIC has demonstrated its capacity to fulfill its mandate as a subsidiary organ of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation on a consistent basis. Over the past decade, CESRIC has contributed to the policy-making process and has achieved practical results. These results have enabled OIC countries in addressing a host of socio-economic developmental challenges through a coordinated effort that includes policy reform, formulation and implementation of strategic plans, and guidance of national programs and policies in various areas. The Center, in its assistance of the OIC Fora, actively contributes to encouraging policy dialogue and partnership, building institutional and human capital, and promoting sustainable development in the OIC region. Distinguished participants, dear guests, the seminar is CESRIC's attempt at bringing together experts from OIC member countries, relevant OIC institutions, and international organizations to discuss issues that are faced by elderly and people with disabilities in OIC countries. Throughout this seminar, we aim to encourage dialogue and knowledge exchange on socio-economic policy measures and programs that focus on enhancing the well-being of elderly and persons with disability. The elderly and people with disabilities account for a significant portion of our societies. Yet they face disproportionate challenges every single day. Their quality of life and their ability to participate in society is heavily dependent on the comprehensiveness of policies and programs geared towards their betterment. Without adequate support from the governments, the communities, and their families, elderly and persons with disability will never be able to live healthy, functional lives, as it's their fundamental right in Islam. The 57 OIC member countries are currently home to almost 15% of the world's elderly and 28% of the world's total persons with disability. Culturally, societies in OIC member countries have value systems that promote the care of elderly and persons with disability informally at home. Although our religion, Islam, promotes the care of the elderly and persons with disabilities without any discrimination or bias, cultural and social beliefs and practices are not always in line with the religious understanding. This is a big reason for the underdevelopment of institutional mechanisms that standardize and promote government's role in caring for elderly population and persons with disability. The downside to this is the lack of regulations, formal support, and that addresses the challenges faced by this segment. Also, having policies for elderly and persons with disabilities on paper does not always translate into effective policy implementation. To improve policy implementation and improve institutional capacities of OIC countries, CESRIC Training and Technical Cooperation Department has recently launched a social development capacity building program, which focuses on offering training and capacity building opportunities in the domain of elderly and persons with disability. Then there is also a lack of data and monitoring mechanisms to determine the extent of impact that various policies and programs have had on the elderly and persons with disability. The lack of data and statistics also hinders knowledge exchange, multi-sectorial cooperation, and intra-OIC cooperation, because oftentimes there is a limited knowledge about which policies have been successful in achieving their intended objectives, or if such policies can be replicated in other similar settings. CESRIC, Statistical and Information Department, has made efforts to improve data on social development in OIC countries and is in the process to enrich the OIC statistical database to include comprehensive indicators relevant to the elderly and persons with disability. I am also pleased to say that the Economic and Social Research Department and CESRIC has undertaken a number of activities in the area of socio-economic development of the elderly and persons with disability. CESRIC regular report on the state of elderly in OIC countries was presented to the first session of the Ministerial Conference on Social Development in Istanbul in 2019. This report provides a comprehensive analysis of the current state of the elderly in OIC countries by looking into the latest available data and information concerning labor market, healthcare, cultural norms, and supportive environment. In the coming months, CESRIC will also publish the first edition of a regular report on people with disabilities and special needs in OIC member countries, which not only evaluates major socio-economic and cultural challenges that affect this segment on a daily basis, but also rethinks dominant policy approaches to disability in line with the overreaching principles proposed in the draft OIC Plan of Action on people with disabilities. Lastly, I am proud to say that CESRIC has contributed to the formulation of the OIC strategy on the elderly and the draft OIC Plan of Action on people with disabilities. These two key strategic documents that have set the tone for constructive policy making and intra-OIC cooperation when it comes to the welfare of elderly and persons with disability in OIC countries. These documents have established a platform on which OIC countries and relevant OIC institutions can formulate policies, laws, and programs to enhance the well-being of the elderly and persons with disability, while also ensuring that the developmental agenda in OIC countries is in line with international conventions on this subject. Distinguished participants, dear guests, I hope that this seminar will provide an excellent opportunity not only to discuss the state of elderly persons with disabilities in OIC countries, but also to exchange expertise, knowledge, and experience on this very important topic. It is my firm belief that this discussion and the deliberations that we undertake in this seminar will provide guidance to OIC countries in developing and adopting targeted measures that address and alleviate the challenges faced by elderly and people with disability. I am also confident that the discussion will encourage intra-OIC cooperation among member countries and OIC institutions in this domain. I would like to thank the distinguished speakers and guests for participating in this seminar once more. I wish you a great success. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you, Mr. Farasin. Now I would like to invite Mrs. Amina Obaid Al-Hajri, Director General for Cultural, Social and Family Affairs at the OIC, to read the message of His Excellency Hussein Brahim Taha, the Secretary General of the OIC. The floor is yours, Mrs. Al-Hajri.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Mr. Fadi Farasin, the Assistant Director General of the Center for Statistical, Economic and Social Research and Training for Islamic Countries, CISRIC, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. At the outset, I am honored on behalf of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation to express my highest thanks and appreciation to the United Arab Emirates for its big efforts in hosting and organizing this global event, Expo 2020, which is one of the most important and largest exhibitions held in the world. This organization of such a great event by the UAE represents a source of pride for all of us and reflects the international confidence in the ability of the United Arab Emirates to provide a global platform for discussing the challenges facing the world today, especially in the time that exceptional global health conditions related to the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic are shaking the world, along with the precautionary measures taken by countries to contain it. I'm also pleased to extend my thanks to the Center for Statistical, Economic and Social Research and Training for Islamic Countries, CISRIC, headed by His Excellency, the Director General Nabil Dabour, for this noble initiative to hold this seminar on the elderly and people with disabilities, as statistics confirm that there are more than 1 billion people in the world who have one form of disabilities. That is equivalent to 1 out of every 7 people in the world. Ladies and gentlemen, our world today is facing many challenges in the health, economic, educational, and social domains. And these challenges have been exacerbated during the COVID-19 pandemic, which has affected by elderly and people with disabilities more than any other group. Therefore, the international community today, along with all its international institutions and bodies and civil society organizations, are called upon to make more effort aimed to strengthen international commitments in terms of supporting these groups in order to enable them to face the health, economic, educational, and social repercussions. Ladies and gentlemen, the OIC, attach great importance to the cause of the elderly and the empowerment and inclusion of people with disabilities. As the first session of the Ministerial Conference in Social Development hosted by the Republic of Turkey, December 2019, adopted the OIC strategy for the elderly as a guiding document for the OIC member states, but also for those working in this field in the relevant OIC organs and institutions with the aim of strengthening coordination and cooperation in order to achieve the goals of the organization in this field. The OIC General Secretariat is also working in coordination with the relevant organs and institutions of the organization, especially CICERIC, in order to prepare the OIC Plan of Action for the empowerment and inclusion of people with disabilities, and implementation of the resolution of the Council of Foreign Ministers and the decisions of the relevant sectoral and ministerial conference. In the context, the General Secretariat, in cooperation with the government of the Republic of Guinea, held 2 workshops to develop a draft plan of action for the said strategy. It is also preparing to hold an open-ended intergovernmental expert group meeting to discuss the prepared draft for onward presentation to the 2nd Ministerial Conference in Social Development, which will be hosted by the Arab Republic of Egypt. This seminar will provide the experts from the member state, the relevant OIC organs and institutions and partner international organizations, and opportunities to discuss the challenges faced by the elderly and persons with disabilities in the member states, to exchange experience and successful practices in this field, and to study effective way and means to improve the lives of the elderly and persons with disabilities. Ladies and gentlemen, the human family today is more demanding than ever before to unite efforts for the cause of people with disabilities and the elderly. And I would like, from this August Assembly, to assure you that OIC General Secretariat pledged to continue to give special priority to persons with disabilities and the elderly in its work programs and activities. In addition, your presence today to participate in this seminar expresses the importance that your countries and institutions attach to these fragile social groups and your keenness to provide them with social security and improve their living conditions. In conclusion, I would like to reiterate on behalf of the OIC General Secretariat, many thanks to CICERIC, and I wish this seminar every success in achieving its noble goals for the sake of our Islamic nation's betterment. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you, Mrs. Al-Hajri. Now we will proceed to our seminar. I would like to invite Mr. Mazhar Hussein, Director of Economic and Social Research Department at CESRIC, as the moderator of the seminar. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ms. Fatima. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, a very good afternoon to all of you. It's my great pleasure and honor to welcome you all to this panel discussion of our seminar on elderly and persons with disabilities in OIC member countries. As it has been said earlier, this is an important and timely event for the OIC member countries, especially in these challenging times when authorities and general public alike are undergoing socioeconomic pressures due to the COVID-19 pandemic. In this context, definitely we need some new insights and ideas on how to protect and promote the rights of the most vulnerable segments of our societies. We are looking forward to learning and sharing successful national, regional, and international experiences, programs, and initiatives during this panel discussion. So let me first invite our distinguished panelists and welcome them to the stage. I would like to call upon Ms. Tazeen Qureshi to join me. And Ms. Nada Jafar, and Ms. Romaisa Jailan, please. So, ladies and gentlemen, today with us we have an excellent and prolific group of panelists with diverse perspectives and backgrounds. I'm certain that we are going to listen to very interesting and insightful ideas and opinions from our panelists. As far as the proceedings of the panel discussion are concerned, I'll make a brief introduction of our distinguished panelists and the topics they are going to talk about, and invite them one by one to make their presentations or statements. After hearing from all panelists, we'll open the floor for questions and answers and comments from the participants. So let me begin with introducing our first panelist, Ms. Tazeen Qureshi. Ms. Qureshi is a researcher in the Economic and Social Research Department at CESRIC. Since joining CESRIC in 2018, Ms. Qureshi has contributed to various technical reports and strategic programs and plans of actions produced by CESRIC concerning vulnerable segments of our society, particularly women, youth, elderly, and persons with disabilities. Today, Ms. Qureshi will deliver a presentation on the findings of CESRIC's regular reports on elderly and persons with disabilities and special needs in OIC member countries. She will share with us latest data and statistics on state of elderly and persons with disabilities, while highlighting major issues and challenges faced by them and policy measures to improve the quality of life of elderly and persons with disabilities in OIC member countries. So, floor is yours, Ms. Tazeen. You got 20 minutes to make your intervention. Please.
Dear participants, both physical and virtual, speakers, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for attending this seminar today. I'm Tazeen Qureshi, as Mr. Mazhar told you, a researcher at CESRIC, and I'll be sharing with you the findings from two of CESRIC's regular reports on elderly and persons with disabilities. But first, I'd like to take a moment to thank the hosts of this seminar, UAE and the Expo 2020 organizing team, for this opportunity to hold a seminar on this important subject, along with the OIC General Secretariat. Of course, their patronage of this event has been invaluable. Ladies and gentlemen, talking about the challenges faced by the elderly and persons with disabilities is important for OIC countries. A majority of OIC member countries are developing nations or nations with medium to low incomes. It is important for a number of reasons. As a developing bloc, OIC countries face several socioeconomic developmental issues that are not just important for the country's development, but also for the welfare of elderly and persons with disabilities. The three main the three main important reasons why this topic is important and why we're talking about it today is because declining fertility rates and longer life expectancies are expected to give way to aging being a serious concern for OIC countries in the near future. Fertility, for example, has decreased by 1.4 children per woman from 1990 to 2025. Life expectancy, on the other hand, at 60 has increased by 2.5 years, which means that women are having less number of children and people are living longer, which puts strains on the social protection systems, on government services, public services, etc. What we as CESRIC have found through our research is that current policy frameworks and social protection policies for aging and disability are either insufficient or very constrictive in OIC member countries. In many cases, there are gaps between the policies and their implementation. This is especially concerning for us because aging, while the developed countries have had time to deal with this topic and to adjust their policies according to it in the short term and long term, for developing countries, this is an issue that is yet to reach its peak. And thirdly, it's important to talk about this issue today is because the well-being of elderly and persons with disabilities requires holistic efforts that not only range from like increasing investment in services for them, but also for specialized policy responses, and that's where CESRIC comes in. As CESRIC, as the Economic and Social Research Department of CESRIC, what we do is policy research. We talk about the state of elderly and people with disabilities. We identify areas of concern and challenges, but we also point towards the way forward by suggesting policy recommendations. Our primary publications on this subject are our report on the state of elderly. The next biennial edition of this report is due in 2022. We also will begin publishing a report on persons with disabilities, the first edition, which is also due in 2022. We have contributed, as Ms. Al-Hajri said, to the OIC strategy on the elderly, which was adopted at the first OIC Ministerial Conference on Social Development in 2019. And we've also had a contribution in the draft OIC Plan of Action on Persons with Disabilities, which is currently under deliberation by the Social Development Ministers. We presented it to them in 2019 as well. Coming back to the topic at hand and the main findings of our reports, as of 2020, a majority, that's 59.8% of the world's elderly, that's age 60 or over, reside in non-OIC developing countries. In OIC countries, the share of elderly population is 13.5% of the total population, but it is forecasted that this percentage will increase by 6% in the next 30 years. In developed countries, elderly populations account for almost 26.6% of the total populations. Similarly, as Ms. Amina mentioned, there are over 1 billion persons with disabilities in the world. As of 2019, around 28% of these people were residing or living in OIC, in the 57 OIC member countries. That is a large share of persons with disabilities. Amongst the various themes that we explore, study, and analyze in our studies, one is the health outcomes of the elderly and persons with disabilities in OIC countries. What we found is that 76% of disabilities in OIC member countries right now are caused by non-communicable diseases. Some of these diseases, actually a large number of these diseases, are avoidable or preventable if correct and timely and preventative measures are in place. We also found that the average healthy life expectancy at the age 60 in OIC countries is 13.9 years, which is lower than the global average. And annually, elderly and persons with disabilities lose about 9,470 years of healthy life due to disability for every 100,000 people. Now, these health outcomes are not all because of natural reasons, but also some because of the lack of services, institutional reasons, the lack of investment in health infrastructure and things like that. Another area that we look at is the labor force participation of elderly age 65 and older. As of 2019, the average labor force participation of women aged 65 and over was almost half than that of men in OIC countries. In both the cases, OIC countries had fairly average performance in this area when compared to especially the developed countries. But that's given that the share of population is still quite young in the OIC member countries. What the lack of labor force participation does, especially for elderly and persons with disabilities, is that it becomes a reason for their descent to poverty. What happens is that if an individual has an impairment or a disability, not only do they face tangible challenges, but also intangible challenges. Like they may face stigma and discrimination, which forces their social exclusion. What their social exclusion does is it keeps them from attending schools, it keeps them from employment, there are discriminatory practices, they cannot have healthy social networks, they do not have access to political and legal processes. For example, there might not be enough number of sign language interpreters in government agencies or things like that. Which in turn gives them fewer opportunities, which naturally gives them fewer ways to earn an income, to persist living with a certain lifestyle, and their eventual descent into poverty. Usually, their descent into poverty and they stay in poverty for longer periods of time, for extended period of times, and it's often generational. The unmet needs of persons with disability especially tend to be particularly high in OIC member countries when it comes to rehabilitation, access to assistive devices, their access to education and vocational training, and obviously counseling services. Now again, this is not just a matter of lack of investment in infrastructure, but also a combination of attitudes and behaviors, where in some, let's say, OIC countries, there might be a case where going to mental health facilities or accessing counseling services might be considered taboo, or there might be stigma attached to it. When you combine factors like COVID-19 with such existing scenario, it further exacerbates their circumstances. Like, for example, a very popular response measure to COVID-19 was lockdowns and mobility restrictions, which in such cases where they don't have access to services at home, can prove very detrimental for their well-being. In such scenarios, what becomes very important, and especially like in COVID-19 situation, is government support for elderly and people with disabilities. In the 2 reports that we are about to publish soon, we have covered extensively social protection coverage of the elderly and persons with disabilities. This was partly in line because of the resolutions of the social development ministers, and because this is an emerging topic that developing countries need to address now before they're in the thick of the issue. What we found is that social protection for persons with severe disabilities as of 2019 was really problematic in OIC member countries. Only 3 countries, that's Albania, Azerbaijan, and Brunei Darussalam, offer universal social protection for persons with disabilities. Only 8 have social assistance programs, which are non-contributory, which means that the government will support them no matter what. A high number of countries, that's 44 countries, do have social insurance, but that's contributory. So that means anyone who's not been contributing to the system, like let's say refugees and migrants, persons with disabilities who are not registered, will not be able to access contributory systems. Similarly, we found that elderly pension beneficiaries out of the total population of elderly was the lowest in OIC countries at 31.5% out of all the other groups. This is especially concerning because pension is often the only source of income that elderly people have, especially in developing countries with high inflation rates and unpredictable prices of services, especially public services. What we also found out was that the national policies and plans, like I mentioned in the very beginning, there was a gap between policies and their implementation. What we found out that policies and plans that give support to caregivers to prevent elder abuse are limited in 4 OIC countries. There are no such programs in 12 OIC countries. And large-scale programs to prevent elder abuse only exist in 11 countries. Similarly, OIC countries with strategies, policies, or laws to address challenges faced by persons with disabilities, there were only 8 countries with national policies, 21 with strategies or action plans, and 36 with laws and regulations. The problem with strategies and action plans, even general regulations or national policies, is that they're not enforceable until you have a legal framework in place. But this is obviously to say that what we as researchers faced while preparing both of these reports is all of these statistics were severely hindered by the lack of data. What we repeat over and over again in every international and regional forum is that there is a very severe need for OIC member countries to report, collect data, disseminate, so on and so forth. Data is very important for us because it helps formulate timely and effective policies, and it also helps policymakers understand issues that affect elderly and persons with disabilities. It also improves needs assessment, like for example, let's say CESRIC's Technical and Training Capacity Building Department works on data. Their programs will work on what is needed, and needs assessment is only possible, accurate needs assessment, if we have the right data and statistics. They help develop monitoring mechanisms, they help determine which interventions are successful, and so on. And lastly, the most important perhaps is that if there's a lot of data, if there's a lot of statistics on persons with disabilities, let's say like children or youth or women, then it will increase awareness about the issues that they face, and it will improve their visibility. Data is crucial, let's say even in the media, social media, through studies, through academia, through practice and activism, to bring light to the challenges that elderly and persons with disability face on a day-to-day basis. With that being said, one of a new approach that we took in our report, the first edition of Persons with Disabilities and Special Needs in OIC member countries, is to rethink how OIC countries can approach aging and disability policies. What has happened is there's been a disconnect on the Western agenda on aging and disability policies and the OIC agenda. So what we have done is we have highlighted how OIC countries can implement policies that are not only culturally appropriate, in line with their national interests, but also in line with international conventions. For example, we stress that OIC member countries should ensure diversity, inclusiveness, and human dignity as core values when making policies for elderly and persons with disabilities. Making societies inclusive is both a process and a goal. Towards improving the social, economic, cultural, and political participation of these groups. It is also very important because this kind of approach ensures that issues like stigma, discrimination, ageism, or even abuse can be kept at bay. We also propose using a life course approach with multi-sector cooperation while developing policies. What happens is usually the ministry or commission that is responsible for elderly policy works solely or alone in a vacuum and is not really linked to the private sector or other sectors. The two clear advantages of this is that it will definitely improve the quality of services by standardizing services on a national level, by linking the gaps, bridging the gaps. And infrastructure would be better because there'd be multiple agencies working on the same thing. And the other advantage is that it would help design policies that are both intuitive and preemptive. So there's no disconnect between national agencies, private sector, public sector, civil society, etc. Lastly, we stress on employing a gender lens in policy making when talking about issues faced by elderly and persons with disabilities. We all know there is a lot of data and literature on this, that women and girls are disproportionately disadvantaged at home and outside of it. This is elderly women and girls with disabilities. They're also, unfortunately, the primary caregivers within a home environment, which makes using or adopting a gender lens a dyadic focus for us. After rethinking, in addition to rethinking how we approach aging and disability, we as CESRIC, as a research department, recommend that OIC countries assess and reform tangible factors such as laws and regulations and discriminatory practices. If you have strong national level policies and laws, it is more difficult for institutions to get away with discriminatory policies, and it gives more rights back to elderly and persons with disabilities. At the same time, we also recommend that OIC member countries address intangible factors, such as attitudes, behaviors, and cultural beliefs, because often what happens is that a discriminatory practice or a malpractice is fueled by misperceptions, by cultural beliefs that are not true, that are not accurate, and simply because of ignorance or the lack of awareness or education. We also recommend that OIC member countries participate in intra-OIC initiatives. We cannot stress on the importance of knowledge exchange and resource exchange that will occur with intra-OIC initiatives. And lastly, we recommend that OIC member countries try to reduce the risks faced by elderly and persons with disabilities by improving their national capacities and raising awareness about these issues. So that includes social media, popular media, having more dialogue, having more visibility, and let's say political participation of elderly and persons with disabilities. With this, I thank you again. And thank you, Mazhar Bey.
Thank you, Ms. Tazeen, for your very comprehensive and informative presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, now I would like to introduce and invite our next panelist, Ms. Neda Jafar. Ms. Jafar is the head of Statistical Policies and Coordination Unit and SDG focal point on gender and disability statistics at the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Western Asia, headquartered in Beirut, Lebanon. She is leading activities of the Commission towards enhancing statistical capacity of member countries to collect, compile, and disseminate comparable data through development of methodology, standards, and classification. Ms. Jafar has established the Disability Program at Economic and Social Commission for Western Asia in 2016 and has been instrumental in developing a regional harmonized database on disability statistics at the global level and holding the first inter-agency expert group meeting on disability statistics. Floor is yours, Ms. Neda Jafar.
Thank you very much. I will briefly present the analysis of the situations of persons with disability and older persons and their challenges, and also describe the program of statistics that ESCWA has been developing and continuing to implement at the regional level. Oops. I think I need help with this. Right. So, as we know, the number of persons aged 65 plus is expected to triple in the next 3 decades in the Arab region. The Arab countries are expected to see the most rapid growth in the 65 plus population in the coming years. And as we know and heard earlier, that 1 in 7 people of persons are with disability, this age group will increase having people with disabilities in it. Disability is a compounding factor elevated by COVID-19 risks and impacts on older persons. COVID-19 has heightened the vulnerability of around 32 million people. Over 46% of older persons have disabilities, and over 7 million vulnerable older persons who suffer from moderate to severe disabilities. More than 50% of them are women. Older persons are exposed to much greater risks during a pandemic, compounded by a rise in the non-communicable diseases with old age, especially heart disease, cancer, and diabetes at the global level. Persons with disabilities are 3 times more likely to be denied health care, which puts them at risk of not receiving treatment. Almost 50% can't afford health care services. The availability of the UHS increases life expectancy. However, in the Arab country in 2017, the index was 63%, compared with 81% for the European Union, leaving many social groups vulnerable, especially older persons, uncovered. With aging, global population and a rise in non-communicable diseases, more than 2 billion people will need at least one assistive product by 2030, with many older people needing 2 or more. An aging population may result in an increase in living alone. Nearly 2 million older persons, 14% live alone or are single parents with children. 66% are older women with disabilities. An increased need for caregivers equipped with assistive technologies. The majority may also face multiple functional difficulties in carrying out daily routines. Many find difficulty in carrying out personal care or household activities. For example, in Yemen Household Budget Survey in 2014, it was found out that 50% of the 65-plus population with a lot of difficulty or severe level of difficulty had difficulty in taking care of themselves. Illiteracy, there is 61% of population aged 65 and plus in the Arab region are illiterate. And there are more illiterate women aged 65 plus, 74%, for example, for women, and for men, 47%. And in majority of Arab countries, there are also not covered by social insurance or other benefits, as my colleagues mentioned. In Yemen, Household Budget Survey in 2014, there were 64% persons with disabilities don't receive social grants, benefits, or insurance. In addition, during COVID-19, the gender-based violence among women and girls with disabilities increased due to social isolation. Persons with disabilities are 3 times more likely to experience different forms of violence than persons without disabilities. The SDG 11 aims to make cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. Specifically, Target 11.2 and 11.7 addresses the issues of urban accessibility for vulnerable population and aim to enhance social cohesion and secure equal opportunities to all. Sub-indicators measure social sustainability of public transportation, where system accessible average user trip, distance, and affordability. In Palestine, they found out that 76% with disabilities did not use public transportation because of lack of accommodation and facilities. In Morocco, 74% with disabilities were either unable to access public transport or found difficulty in accessing it. Can you help me? It's okay, I can do this. Now I will talk to you about the disability program at ESQA. Disability program at ESQA was established in 2016 due to the need of the region in compiling data and providing more information on disability statistics. It basically collects data from countries and help them to harmonize this data and produce it and analyze it in documents and reports in order to give the policymaker with more information to draw their national policies. We also provide more methodological guidelines and frameworks to help these countries in producing harmonized data sets. We have many partners in the region, the Washington Group, for example, CBM, and so forth, from the global arena and from the at the international level. When we started in 2016, only 10 countries were collecting data using the Washington Group questions. These countries not only used the Washington Group as a harmonized tool, but there were some inconsistencies in the way these tools were used. Now, after a lot of capacity development and work, we were able to present some guidelines to these countries on how to use the Washington Group. And we also were able to increase the countries to 17 countries who are applying the same tools in the Arab region. We also have a Casablanca group. This is a group representatives from the National Statistical Office. Basically, they derive the work towards compiling data, harmonized data in their own institutions and in their surveys. They also strengthen the statistical capacity of disability statistics for all stakeholders. And they assist each other in advising and sharing good practices. We have, during this short period, was able to produce many outputs. There are some policy outputs and there are statistical outputs. Our report on disability in the Arab region provides a lot of information, statistical data that we have compiled during the years. It also provides country profiles on each. I also would like to attract your attention to the guidelines that we have produced. These guidelines are the basis for any country in the world to use it to produce a harmonized data sets using the Washington Group. It has the pitfalls and the good notes how to conduct each survey and implement it. We also have produced ESQA Disability Framework. It has 115 indicators that links the SDGs to the CRPD and the human rights instrument. So it's very useful in reporting on data in these reports. And some policy briefs regarding older persons and disabilities. We also have produced a toolkit for violence against women, a comprehensive standalone questionnaire with guidelines on how to train the field workers. We included in this toolkit questions on disability in order to produce more information in-depth information on persons with disabilities. Of course, not only it is gender-related, but it's also related to persons, older persons, since most of the violence is happening for women and those with disabilities. In our Arab Gender Gap Report, we have made a special chapter on persons with disabilities, and it shows also by age groups the different inequalities that happens from a gender perspective. And in addition, we have compiled all this data in an interactive database. It has 48 indicators so far. We are hoping to increase this data set, as our colleagues have mentioned. Statistics is very important for policy making, and we, in this round, new round of data collection, we hope to get double the number of indicators for the Arab countries. We have established, also developed a dashboard for, based on this data that gives quick analysis for each country in an interactive way in areas of population, education, and work. We have also produced a registry of all the initiatives and activities of countries in one place, where all the reports and questionnaires and results of these data sets have taken place. And we have been involved in a lot of training workshops, interagency expert group meetings. Our data has been used in the Secretary General report, in addition to other regional reports. And we also do bilateral training and technical missions to countries in order to involve them in producing more data and more information. Our latest initiatives is we are developing a standalone questionnaire for disability, for persons with disability. And this standalone survey is very important now because it goes in depth, collects more information on the environmental aspects of these people. It goes by age group, and it's designed to give each age group the challenges, the issues they face. A specific section will be also dedicated to older persons. My final recommendations is that countries the issue of disability has really been on the agenda, and countries have taken lead in producing more data, harmonizing their data sets, and following standards. So we hope that in the next few years we will be among the first regions that have one of the good and comparable data sets in the region. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Neda Jaffer, for your excellent presentation and sharing your institutional experience with us. I personally, as a researcher, really liked your initiatives on statistical capacity building. And as you rightly mentioned, that you are planning, in fact, and it should be, in fact, in other regions as well. I hope that other regions gonna take lessons from your experience, and we're gonna overcome this lack of data issue in this important area. Of course, we may have some questions and queries about initiatives, about the execution, as well as available opportunities. We're gonna have those questions and queries during the general discussion. Now, let's move to our third panelist, Ms. Rumaisa Jailan. Ms. Jailan is working as an expert with the Department of Elderly Welfare in the Ministry of Family and Social Services of the Republic of Turkey. She is currently a doctoral candidate in population studies with interest in demographic transition, aging, fertility, mortality, civil registration and vital statistics, elderly care systems, and cultural psychology. Ms. Jailan will deliver a presentation on policies, programs, and best practices pertaining to elderly and disability care in Turkey. Floor is yours, Ms. Rumaisa Jailan.
Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Moderator, thanks for giving me the floor to make my presentation on elder care and disability care policies in Turkey. I also would like to express my gratitude to the Expo Dubai team and the Organization of Islamic Cooperation for organizing this seminar series in the name of Ministry. As was referred in the title, my presentation will be about elder care and disability care policies in Turkey. I won't go into detail. This is my presentation plan. What you see on the screen are the covers of our vision documents on aging and disability. Our national policy on aging and disability has been shaped to enable elderly persons and persons with disabilities a wide range of independent individual movement area. For the elderly, it is within the framework of active aging. For both groups, it's assumed to be within the family integrity and by maintaining their ties with social life. We know that not all elderly persons and persons with disabilities have the same patterns and profiles. They have different backgrounds, capacities, needs, and expectancies. We aim to enable them to live reputable, dignified, and confident lives. You see two graphs now. These were taken from the state of elderly in OIC member countries report. I marked Turkey in red rectangle in each graph. As you see in the left graph, we have rather an old population compared to other member countries. Although, according to estimations, Lebanon and Azerbaijan will be older than us, we are still expected to keep our place in top 5 in 2030. The right graph shows that a considerable percentage of elderly people 60 years or over in Turkey are living independently. According to data of Turkish Statistical Institute, the percentage of 65 years and older population is 9.5% by 2020. Which means that about 1 out of every 10 people in Turkey is 65 years and older. You see the Turkey map highlighted related to the percentage of elderly rate in each province. The east and southeast parts are rather younger compared to west and northern regions. On the other hand, our population pyramid shows that we have decreasing fertility and mortality rates at the same time. Although the percentage of working age group is still prominent, we see a pronounced increase in the elderly population, while a decreasing pattern in the young dependent age group. According to our estimations, our population projections, the percentage of the elderly population will keep the increasing trend in relation with the demographic transition process. In 60 years, every 1 person in 4 will be 65 years and older in Turkey. On the other hand, there is a cross-sectional part of aging and disability. There are many cross-sectional parts, but I will focus on this. Again, these graphs were taken from the same report. You see that Turkey has the highest number of Alzheimer's disease and other types of dementia, and a considerable amount of people aged 60 years and over have mental or behavioral disorders. When it comes to general terms of disability, we also see the high prevalence in Turkey within the group of member countries. As you can see from the map, both aging and disability patterns are not homogeneous for our country. This is a rather updated rate for disability statistics from Turkstat from 2019 data. You see the percentages of individuals with at least 1 disability by age group. As you can see, disability prevalence is closely correlated with population aging. The demographic transition process that we have experienced, which was resulted in an aging population, led us to design an integrated care system. From home health care services to volunteering, different services are provided by different authorities in this system. All of these elements are working coordinately and complementary. What our General Directorate is mainly responsible for is the long-term care, temporary guest care, day care, and social care services at home. you see that we have daycare and care and rehabilitation centers, alternative social service units for persons with disabilities. The number of beneficiaries is prominent for daycare centers in terms of disability. For the elderly persons, we have nursing homes and daycare centers. In this category, we see that comparably higher numbers of beneficiaries in long-term care services. I briefly explain all of these facilities right now. For persons with disabilities, long-term care centers have been improved from high-rise buildings and isolated care systems to low-rise building and human-centered, more accessible, customizable care systems. Now these centers are built at the city centers, accessible, preferably close to the healthcare centers and suitable for city transportation. They have social rehabilitation areas. They are ergonomically designed and have special living rooms for each person. Persons with disabilities benefit from the long-term care services of the ministry completely free of charge. For nursing homes, you see 3 different types of buildings: site type, courtyard type, and tiny house type. These are also designed human centers, just as the previous facilities. For persons with disabilities, in low-rise buildings preferably, at the city centers, it's even more important for them to being close to the healthcare centers, be it accessible and suitable for city transportation. The rooms of nursing homes are also customizable and spacious. Elderly persons benefit from the long-term care services free of charge or by partial fee according to their income. We plan and build our nursing homes according to regional density of elderly population. These are examples of alternative types for social service units. The first picture is from an umutevi. It can be translated as hope home, but the translation is not giving the exact meaning, so I left it Turkish. They are aiming to enable persons with disabilities to live in independent houses or apartments and to actively participate in community life with the society they live in. In these houses, which are also defined as home-type social services, care of 4 to 6 persons with disabilities is provided under supervision of professional staff accompanied by a home care staff. The yellow apartment you see is an example for elderly living home. They also provide services affiliated with nursing homes, but they are not nursing homes. These are the houses and apartments where the elderly can stay alone or with their spouses, preferably consisting of a room, kitchen, bathroom, and a toilet. And all kinds of services of them are provided by the directorate of the nursing home. At the right, you see pictures of visually impaired individuals who participated in social rehabilitation and education programs. We support our visually impaired citizens to develop their life skill with our educational, social, and vocational rehabilitation programs aimed at enabling them to continue their lives independently. Rehabilitation services are provided in periods like approximately 6 months to visually impaired individuals aged 15 and over who are congenitally visually impaired or who have subsequently lost their sight. Our care policy aims to provide a model in which people receive care support alongside their families and relatives, integrated with social life instead of institutional long-term care. It is aimed to increase the number of centers providing daycare services for elderly people and persons with disabilities. With daycare services, we aim to support the participation of elderly individuals and persons with disabilities in social life and increase their independent living skills, supporting them to spend quality time during the day by providing care and rehabilitation for them, providing psychosocial support services not only for them but also for their family members, and providing their families the opportunity to allocate time for their other occupations in daily life apart from care. Temporary and guest care service is also offered free of charge to elderly persons and persons with disabilities if the families or caregivers are temporarily unable to care for them. They can receive care from our care centers for up to 45 days a year. As long as they stay in these centers, all of their needs are met by the facility. We also provide daycare and home care services in coordination with municipalities. These pictures are from the Elderly Support Program, which was started in 2016. With this program, we supported the daycare and home care projects of metropolitan municipalities. On the municipal basis, services are usually offered to elderly persons and persons with disabilities under the main titles such as psychological support service, health services, social and cultural activities, cleaning and care services, physical therapy, hydrotherapy services, wheelchair lift services, guidance, companionship, and counseling services. Home health service provides services in the home environment to the bedridden patients living with their families. Rather than diagnosing, in this service, follow-up and administration of treatments and the training of the relatives or caregivers are implemented. At this point, I want to mention our COVID-19 measures in the long-term care facilities very briefly. As you know, elderly persons in the long-term care facilities have been one of the most vulnerable groups in the pandemic era. As of January 7, 2020, we started to take measures in all of our long-term care facilities. I'm focusing on the date since our first COVID-19 case was seen on March 11, 2020. In addition to the basic hygiene measures such as social distance rules, wearing masks, using personal protective equipment, and disinfectants, we implemented PCR tests for staff and residents in our long-term care facilities whenever a suspicious situation has occurred. We created social isolation units by dividing rooms, floors, or reserving some facilities for COVID-19 cases only. We implemented a fixed shift system for a very long time, beginning with 7 days, which turned to 10 and 14 days. We also reserved specific rooms and floors for our staff. Our beneficiaries of long-term care facilities were prioritized in all of the vaccination programs. This is the graph of home care allowance. It's a monthly social aid provided by state to people with certain disability rate in one or more of the family members. Currently, approximately 563,036 people receive home care allowances, of which 26% are elderly individuals. In this context, as my colleagues mentioned in their presentation, 91% of caregivers are women, the mothers, wives, daughter-in-laws, daughters, sisters, and 9% are men. With the home care allowance, we do not separate the persons with disabilities from their family, the environment they are used to, while providing care for them. We provide their care by supporting their family. We support them not only in economic terms, but also in other areas where they need help. This assistance significantly reduces the need and the cost of institutional care. Another social assistance for persons with disabilities is the social allowance provided within the frame of Act Number 2022. It's given monthly by Social Assistance and Solidarity Foundation to those with disability rate of at least 40% and above, who are not subject to any of the social security institutions established by law, and whose need is documented by the relevant foundation. On the left graph, you see the share of population above statutory retirement age receiving an old age pension by contribution in OIC countries. As it can be seen, Turkey keeps its status at top 5. Also, we see that Turkey has the highest pension spending as a share of GDP within the OIC countries. As one of the critical risks covered by social security system in is elderliness in Turkey. According to law number 5510, people who have fulfilled the requirement of age and premium payment by working registered in the insurance system for a certain period of time are eligible to receive a pension. As a result, they are entitled to be included in social security. But the change in social conditions have constituted the requirement of providing protection against financial risks, monthly pension, and health aid for those who are not covered by the social security system. With the aforementioned law, number 2022, destitute Turkish citizens who are 65 years old and older and who do not receive income or pension from a social security institution are granted pension without the requirement of having insurance or paying the premium as a requirement of the principle of social state. The main purpose of these pensions is to provide a subsistence level of living and social security for people at the age of 65 and older. I've covered care system, social allowances, and social security system in Turkey within the scope of elderly people and persons with disabilities. Now I will talk about the projects and services under the main titles and finish my presentation. In terms of active participation in social life, we provide income support payments as a part of free travel for elderly persons. We organize bocce tournaments with the residents of our nursing homes. We are opening call centers working 24/7 for hearing impaired persons for enabling them to communicate completely and clearly. We aim to increase daycare and home care services with our projects, with improving daycare and home care services for the elderly project and increase accessibility of the social services by the most vulnerable segments of the Turkish citizens and persons under temporary protection and persons under international protection project. We will increase the number of daycare facilities. We will support the capacity building programs for these two care types. We will also develop an inclusive elderly care model for Turkey. Daycare and home care services for persons with disabilities also will be supported with similar type of projects. In terms of lifelong learning, we aim to improve both digital and financial literacy for elderly persons. With the pandemic, the impact of digitalization on our daily lives has been seen much more than ever before. This situation created the need for digital literacy for everyone, especially for elderly persons. Also, to prevent digital and financial abuse, they need to be literate in both categories. Related to this situation, we are developing education programs for them. Another project is 60+ freshman universities. These are the samples of university of the third age. In these universities, elderly persons are attending to theoretical and practical courses, get new skills, socialize, and graduate after 4 years. We are also implementing and contributing to the projects and services on the rise of the elderly and age discrimination. Currently, we are preparing a guide on the subject of avoiding age discrimination in communication. We also focus on age discrimination under different titles, such as employment, with the planned workshops. We have also projects and services on employment of persons with disabilities. One of them is employment of persons with disabilities as civil servants. It is done by every 2 years with a specialized exam, specially organized exam for persons with disabilities. 58,520 people were appointed in this way until today. Another project is named Protected Workplaces. In our country, protected workplaces have been opened since 2016 for intellectually disabled individuals and persons with mental health disabilities. We aim to open more protected workplaces to include more of them. With the project of guardianship of the persons with disabilities, we aim to improve the services provided to them and elderly individuals who receive care and accommodation services in facilities affiliated with our ministry. With the second Autism Action Plan we are preparing, we aim to support individuals with autism and their families by introducing new service model that can be implemented in every province by improving service delivery at the central and local levels over the next 3 years. In addition, we aim to strengthen interinstitutional cooperation by ensuring effective monitoring and evaluation of studies carried out in the field of autism throughout Turkey. With the last one, the Family-Based National Early Intervention Program, we are launching a family-oriented, holistic, and systematic early intervention program for infants and children with specifically developmental risk. By our ongoing and planned projects, we aim to improve the systems of daycare and home care services, to provide social integration for different types of disabilities, to create a society for all ages, to raise awareness and prevent ageism and disability discrimination, and to improve and develop different lifelong learning mechanisms. I sincerely appreciate your attention this evening. If anyone has any question, I'll do my best to answer. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Rumaisa Ceylan, for your informative presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, we have heard from our 3 panelists, and now the floor is open for the general discussion. If you would like to ask a question or make a comment, please raise your hand. Also, please introduce yourself and state the name of panelists to whom your question is addressed to before making your intervention. So floor is open for your comments and questions. Thank you.
Thank you. It was really quite interesting to see how the challenges faced by elderly and persons with disability can be resolved, those challenges. And the speakers, they talked about what international organizations can do, like the OIC or the United Nations or UNESCO. And we had another speaker who talked about a specific country case, what a country can do in order to face those challenges faced by people who are elderly or with disability. But something came to my mind is maybe there are other actors in society, like me as an individual. What can an individual do? How can an individual contribute to meeting those challenges? Or what can NGOs do? What role can they play or private sector? What role can also private sector play? So those other actors in society, how can they really help or contribute to facing and meeting the challenges faced by elderly and people with disability? So this is a question maybe open to all the panelists. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else? Madam, thank you.
Thank you for all of you. My question is for Ms. Gaylan, about the experience of Turkey in the domain of elderly and people with disabilities. I've noticed that the experience is going so far as from the other countries. Just say one from this experience, what kind of challenges that have faced Turkey? Is that economic challenges? Is that anything else? And how can we move this experience from Turkey to other countries with less development and less economic? Because what you mentioned is, I think, is the budget of that is very huge. What kind of these countries with less economy budget, how can we transfer this, making in the policies, give ideas about to just guarantee that they will offer good services with less budget? I want to see from your experience, how can we move this experience to other countries? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, please.
I would like to ask a question to Ms. Jafar. How COVID-19 pandemic has affected the well-being of the elderly and disabled people with disabilities in the Arab region? And since the beginning of the pandemic, is there any specific exemplary program that you would like to share from the Arab region? Thank you.
Thank you. By the way, even panelists can ask questions from other fellow panelists. So if there is any one who is interested in asking more information or inquiring about a program initiative, you are also welcome. So for time being, we have 3 questions. So,
excuse me, one more here.
Okay, please.
First of all, thanks for all very interesting and very informative presentation and discussions. I have 2 questions. The first one for the CESRIC organization. Are your data sets available openly, so can anyone download them and use them for his own research, or I should contact you for that? The second question for the Turkish panelist, Mr. Mesa, regarding the physiotherapy and hydrotherapy, it was very catching. How you do and plan the physiotherapy in elderly's homes? It's very difficult, especially in the Arab world. So how's your experience could be transformed and translated into the Arab region? Could you help us with that, please? And thanks all. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Okay, so now we have 4 or 5 questions, in fact. A couple of them mean, of course, more or less similar. So we'll start with maybe the question posed by Mr. Fadi to all the panelists, that as a civilian, as an individual, what role we can play to somehow improve the situation of elderly and persons with disabilities. So anyone who would like to volunteer to start answering the question first? Okay, Madam Jafar, you can.
Yes, with regard to disability, the first problem we have in the Arab region and maybe in many other regions is the stigma. Even those who are most educated will hide their children that have some difficulties. And this is one of the major problems that in raising awareness in order to reach these people and help them would be a basic step to overcome. NGOs can help also in elaborating on the challenges and issues faced by the persons with difficulties or older persons. By elaborating these issues and challenges to the statisticians will be able to collect more precise data, contextual data, in order to provide policymakers with the information to take the right actions.
Thank you.
Can I?
Please.
What Ms. Jaffer mentioned is from the institutional side of things. On an individual level, what happens in today's age is that the public attention for any topic is a couple of minutes or a couple of days at most, especially with the social media. So raising awareness and spreading information in different languages, different formats, accessible formats, becomes very important. Like one of the main issues that elderly and persons with disabilities faced in the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic was the lack of accurate information. There was a lot of false information around. So on an individual level, just raising awareness about issues, spreading information, even if one person in their network does so, will help alleviate, will first help clarify the situation and alleviate a lot of false information, a lot of false narratives. There's also the option at an individual level to contribute and volunteer to your local organizations. Most of the activities that are done for the welfare of elderly and persons with disabilities is grassroots level. And therefore, just volunteering or contributing to your local organization, there's always one in every neighborhood or national level or local level, can work. The civil society, especially activism, doesn't necessarily have to be aggressive or in your face. But maybe just motivating policymakers to take action, to take progressive action, even if not for tangible factors and intangible factors, can go a long way.
Thank you. Ms. Romesa, of course, you are representing the ministry, and I'm sure while implementing these programs and initiatives you mentioned during your presentation, definitely you are working with the volunteers, with the NGOs, civil society groups. So how has been your experience and what more can be done?
Specifically, we prioritize the communication with NGOs and with municipalities, with the actors that can be effective in the local center, because when you are at the directorate, when you are at the ministry, you cannot completely get all of the problems. You may not reach all of the problems exactly. So the individual movements or the NGO contribution or the municipalities cooperate us and actively contribute us in that way. They told us, or we have a system called GMAR. I cannot translate it to English right now, but people can reach through online website and tell us that we have that kind of problem. For example, if they see an elderly person in the street, like in bad conditions, they can call us and they can say, can you reach him, her? Can you take him to a nursing home or someplace like that? We in a fast manner and actively participate and answer the needs of them. So there are some kind of warning tables for us, like they see something wrong and they tell us, like individually or as NGOs, as municipalities. We all work coordinately.
Yes. Thank you. So the second question we had, again, it was directed to Ms. Romesa about the Turkish experience. How hard it was to make this much progress you have made. And also the cost of doing this whole effort, and how we can take Turkey as a role model for member countries in another setting with less financial means or capacities to replicate some of your initiatives. Please.
First of all, compared to European countries or older populations, the long-term care services or the usage of long-term care services are not high as much like compared to Germany or Switzerland, etc. But it's getting higher and higher. The need is also getting higher and higher. The Turkish state has it has the all responsibility of the budget in itself for a long time. It didn't cooperate with NGOs, or it didn't cooperate with private sector for a very long time. But at some point, we have to contribute. We have to let this contribution from the NGOs, from the other actors. So our recommendation would be the cooperation in earlier stages with NGOs, with private sectors. We don't usually work with international fundings for our citizens in the projects, but maybe these projects or these fundings may help. Also, we follow the European or Japanese experience in the long-term care, like by building institutional long-term care facilities at the first step, but turning them or limiting them by increasing daycare services, home care services, and trying to make alternative units or alternative services for elderly people, because we saw that the cost also is very high for long-term and institutional care services. And the age limit is lower for us. For example, for the private sector, the age limit for a nursing home is 55, and for state-facilitated nursing homes, it's 60. For future, it should be, we have to increase the age for future generations. So we would recommend maybe keeping the age limit higher, and also the requirements for nursing homes. Like, we don't take everyone to nursing homes. First of all, we interview with them if they really need that, like financially, socially, if they are at any risk. But usually we receive them to our nursing homes. But it is not sustainable for a very long time. So the implementation of daycare and home care services for elderly people at the first stage, rather than implementing the long-term and institutional care, would be very useful in terms of also budget. Also, the social aids and home care allowances are very useful in terms of budget. And I want to add that in pandemic era, we saw that the institutional care is not the best choice for people to, they are at higher risk in community centers, living together in a vulnerable group at risk. So we would recommend increasing home care and daycare services, social allowances, even if it's not at the high, even if the budget is not high. People are usually preferring that when they get some kind of money, even if it's not considerable amount.
Thank you. So the third question was directed to Ms. Neda Jafar. So, we are talking in the context of COVID as if COVID is over, but in fact we are living through it. So you may have some preliminary, of course, data and statistics to analyze and understand that what kind of effects or impacts were on the elderly and person with disabilities. And while responding to the negative effects of pandemic, there have been many initiatives at the national level. And according to your understanding, if there is something which can be taken as a role model for other countries to follow among the Arab countries you are dealing with. Please.
Yes, as we all know that with the COVID pandemic, most of the statistical activities has been halted in almost all the national statistical offices, and it has affected the data collection. Now, some countries had done some initiatives like collecting data through mobile surveys, but as we know, that happened in Morocco and in Palestine and other countries. But we know the social exclusion of the elderly and the persons with disabilities, and they're not having really access to all basically mobile or internet or these devices or technologies. However, countries have, on the other hand, started the preparation during COVID. And they started taking note of this exclusion of persons with disabilities and the violence that has increased, or their needs has emerged as a priority. Many of the countries has initiated adding these models, inquiring not only on to measure the prevalence of disabilities, but to know more on the environment, the way they're living, and how they can gather more information to provide data on this. And the countries starting, for example, Egypt and other countries started doing the standalone surveys in order to get more information on this group of people that needs attention beyond the measuring only the prevalence. Definitely, we should not depend on on the statistical office's household surveys. Other countries have started linking using administrative sources instead only of surveys. And through the ID cards, through the registers and other means, to reach and find out the circumstances of these peoples. And also here, Egypt has taken that initiative of checking that. But also in Oman and other countries have used, is gathering, giving more importance to this type of data sources. We will be able to measure the impact when this data comes. Now as I said, we are doing the second round of data collection, measuring what happened before and what's happening now, the differences and what's going on with the standalone survey. We will know the circumstances that has happened with these people and what the impact of COVID happened to them. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Partially, maybe we answered the fourth question from the gentleman. However, he mentioned, if I'm not mistaken, something about old age housing. How it's not that much easy in Arab context as it might have been for Turkey. So did you also faced any kind of resistance at the public level when you started your programs to suppose have old age houses, and also encouraging people to benefit from them, seek help and services? How has been your experience? Thank you.
It was like, as I don't know if you could see the map that I showed, the aging ratio in provincial level is not same for all of the places in Turkey. Some regions are older, some regions are younger. We are not like a totally old population. We have still younger provinces, but in also those younger provinces, we still have those resistant attitudes to nursing homes, like they do not accept or they do not send the elderly persons to there. We opened some facilities, but they were closed because no one wanted to receive care at there. But the situation has been changing like for last 5-10 years approximately, because people used to see that like as a bad manner, bad attitude, like some kind of disrespectful manner to their fathers, mothers, to their elderlies. In our society, the respect for elderly is very important, very essential for a personal characteristics, as a personal characteristics. But with the increasing employment of women and with the increasing responsibilities, people started to look for alternatives to be able to care for their elderly people. Now they have different understanding, like different perspective on the care for elderly. Although it has some resistance, like mostly in eastern and southeastern places, they don't want to send their elderly to nursing homes. They see it like as a disrespectful act. But in those places, when people need to send their elderly to the nursing homes, they have to choose another province, like far, far away from there, to not to be excluded from the society as a bad son, bad daughter. So it's kind of a complicated situation for right now, but some of the elderlies want it themselves, like they say their children, just let me stay in a nursing home. I want to be taken care of there, and usually they prefer the nursing homes of the state because they are cheaper than the private sector, and they have some standards, and they think that they will be looked better in these places, so they want it themselves. For this is a limited proportion, but it's getting higher and higher by time.
Can I?
Please.
One example that came to my mind when I heard your question was of the UAE. If you specifically asked it from a cultural context about the role of family and caregivers, especially in our societies, is that here in UAE they have dedicated housing areas where the son or the daughter can live in the same premise, like on the top floor or the bottom floor of the residence, and the parents can live independently in the bottom. So the unit that's specially for elderly is built with assistive technology and all the updated assistance that they can get, wheelchair access, physical handrails and things like that. Or it's usually like neighboring houses. UAE has launched a very comprehensive, like children can buy land on behalf of their parents, and then the government would help them build a pro-elderly facility, an assistive facility. So in cultural context, that's more easier to digest for us, that if we say our parents are living above us or below us or right next to us, it kind of takes off the onus from the responsibility part of it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think we have answered all the questions, and I hope that the answers were up to the expectations of those who asked. So before closing the panel discussion, let me thank all of our respected and valued panelists for sharing really excellent information, ideas on current state of affairs concerning the elderly and persons with disability, major challenges and impediments faced by them while navigating their everyday life, as well as highlighting successful policy measures to address these challenges, and informing us about various national, regional, and international initiatives and programs which aim to enhance the welfare of elderly and persons with disabilities in OIC member countries. I would also like to thank all participants and audience for joining us today. I hope that you all found our seminar informative and thought-provoking. With these final remarks, I would like to declare the proceedings of our seminar closed. Thank you.
I think